The champagne glass slipped from my hand the moment I heard my ex-wife laugh. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury hotel, but somehow the room suddenly felt colder than winter. Across the crowded reception hall, my former wife, Vanessa, stood beside a handsome man in an expensive navy suit, smiling as if the last 8 years of my life had been nothing more than a joke she had finally learned to tell. Then she saw me. Her smile became wider. She leaned toward the man beside her and whispered something that made him glance in my direction. Vanessa pointed at my simple cream-colored jacket and laughed. She had no idea that the man standing beside her was one of my employees. She had even less idea that I owned the company where he worked. And she certainly had no idea that the quiet, broken man she had left 8 years earlier had spent those years rebuilding himself from nothing. Before we go deeper into this emotional story, if you believe that kindness, patience, and second chances can change a person's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support means more than you know. 8 years earlier, I had been a completely different man. My name was Everett, and at 31, I believed I had already lost everything worth fighting for. Vanessa and I had been married for 6 years. We had met when we were young, when neither of us had much money and both of us dreamed about a beautiful future. I loved her deeply, and for years I believed she loved me too. But life changed after my small technology business collapsed. One failed contract became 3. 3 became unpaid bills. Soon I was working 14-hour days just to keep our apartment and pay what little remained of our debts. Vanessa began to resent me. She stopped seeing the man who was trying to survive and started seeing only a failure. One evening, she packed a suitcase. I remember standing near the bedroom doorway, staring at her while she folded clothes with a calmness that frightened me. I begged her to give me more time. I promised I would rebuild everything. She looked at me with tired eyes and told me she had spent too many years waiting for a husband who never became successful. The words hurt more than the divorce itself. She left the next morning. There was no dramatic fight. No broken furniture. No screaming neighbors. Just an empty closet, a half-finished cup of coffee, and the terrible silence that follows when someone you built your life around suddenly disappears. For months, I barely functioned. Then one afternoon, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, found me sitting outside my apartment with a stack of unpaid bills beside me. She didn't lecture me. She simply brought me a plate of food and told me something I never forgot: failure was an event, not an identity. Those words became the beginning of my second life. I took every job I could find. I repaired computers at night. I worked mornings in a warehouse. I studied business during lunch breaks. Slowly, painfully, I began building another company. This time, I didn't chase appearances. I focused on people. I hired employees who had been rejected elsewhere. I gave second chances to people who had made mistakes. I remembered what it felt like to be judged by your worst moment. Over 8 years, the small company became a successful technology and logistics firm. Eventually, I became wealthy enough that people who once ignored my calls suddenly wanted meetings with me. But wealth never erased the memory of that empty apartment. It only taught me that money could rebuild a house, but it couldn't rebuild a heart. That Saturday afternoon, I had come to the hotel because our company was sponsoring a charity event for young entrepreneurs. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there because I remembered being that young man with a broken business and nowhere to turn. Then Vanessa walked into my life again. She looked almost exactly as I remembered her, except more polished. Her emerald dress caught the sunlight, and expensive jewelry rested against her neck. Beside her stood Julian Mercer, the executive director of one of our newest divisions. Julian was 38, intelligent, confident, and extremely respected within the company. Vanessa didn't know that. She saw him only as a wealthy, powerful man. When she noticed me standing near the entrance, she walked directly toward me with Julian beside her. Her expression carried a strange mixture of surprise and amusement. She looked at my jacket, then at my modest watch, and smiled as though she had discovered an old photograph from a life she no longer cared about. She began speaking loudly enough for several people nearby to hear. She reminded me that 8 years had passed and joked that I apparently still hadn't learned how to dress like a successful man. She told Julian that I had once been her husband and that I used to have big dreams. Then she laughed. I didn't respond. Julian's smile slowly disappeared. He looked at Vanessa, then at me. He knew exactly who I was. He had been in my company for almost 3 years. He knew I rarely announced my position at public events. He also knew that I preferred people to treat me like an ordinary person rather than change their behavior because of my wealth. Vanessa continued mocking me, unaware that every word was becoming more uncomfortable for the man standing beside her. She asked me what I did for a living. I simply told her that I worked with a company called Hale Meridian Group. She laughed again. She said she had never heard of it. Then Julian finally stepped forward. The room seemed to quiet around us. He calmly told Vanessa that Hale Meridian Group was the company he worked for. Vanessa smiled and asked what his position was. Julian glanced at me. Then he said that he was executive director. Vanessa looked impressed. But before she could say anything else, Julian added that he reported directly to the owner. Her smile faded. She looked at me. Julian turned toward me and addressed me with the respect he always showed at work. He called me Mr. Hale. The color drained from Vanessa's face. For a moment, nobody spoke. She looked at my cream jacket again, but this time she seemed to see it differently. The simple watch. The calm expression. The lack of desperation to prove anything. She finally understood. The man she had mocked was not struggling anymore. He had become the person responsible for the company her new partner worked for. But I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Sadness. Because 8 years earlier, I would have dreamed of this exact moment. I would have imagined Vanessa discovering that I had become successful and regretting everything. Yet standing there, watching her face change, I realized I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. I told her there was no need to feel embarrassed. The past was the past. She quietly apologized. But her apology wasn't really about what she had done 8 years earlier. It was about discovering who I had become. That distinction mattered. Julian then did something that surprised everyone. He stepped away from Vanessa and told her he needed to be honest with her. He explained that he had known about my past for years, and he had never judged me for it. He also admitted that he had started realizing that Vanessa was more interested in status than character. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. She asked whether he was ending their relationship because of me. Julian shook his head. He said he was ending it because he had finally seen how she treated people she believed were beneath her. Those words hit harder than anything I could have said. Vanessa lowered her eyes. For the first time that afternoon, she wasn't the confident woman making jokes. She was simply someone confronting the consequences of her choices. I expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, I remembered the woman who had once sat beside me in our tiny apartment eating cheap takeout and laughing until midnight. Somewhere along the way, we had both become strangers. I told her that I sincerely hoped she found happiness. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked why I wasn't angry. I told her that anger had already taken enough years from me. I didn't want to give it another day. Then I walked away. Outside the hotel, the afternoon sun was warm. Cars moved along the street, people laughed at nearby cafes, and life continued as if nothing important had happened. But something had changed inside me. I finally realized that success wasn't becoming rich enough for someone to regret leaving you. Success was becoming strong enough that you no longer needed them to regret it. Months later, I received a letter from Vanessa. She told me she had spent years believing that happiness came from being admired by successful people. She admitted that she had confused comfort with love and status with security. She didn't ask me to take her back. She didn't ask for money. She simply apologized. For the first time, I could accept her apology without reopening the wound. I wrote back and told her that I hoped she would build a life she could be proud of, not because other people admired it, but because she could look at herself in the mirror and know she had treated people kindly. I never saw her again. But I didn't need to. That chapter had finally ended. The real victory wasn't that my ex-wife discovered I had become successful. The real victory was that when I finally had everything she once wanted me to have, I no longer needed her approval. And perhaps that is what healing truly means. Sometimes life doesn't give you an apology. Sometimes it gives you the strength to stop needing one. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may be struggling after rejection or heartbreak, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy for more stories about hope, second chances, and the quiet strength of the human heart. And before you leave, I have one special request. Comment "I choose peace over revenge" if you believe that the best response to being hurt is to become a better person, not a bitter one. Because sometimes the person who breaks your heart isn't the one who decides your future. Sometimes, the day they walk away is the day you finally begin building it. And years later, when they look back and realize what they lost, you may already be standing somewhere they can never reach, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you finally learned to love the life you built without them. That was Everett's real victory. Not wealth. Not revenge. Not watching Vanessa regret her choices. It was waking up one ordinary afternoon and realizing that the man who had once begged someone to stay was finally strong enough to let them go. And for the first time in 8 years, he smiled, not because his past had changed, but because his future finally belonged entirely to him.